Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SourceForge podcast. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Bo Hamilton, senior editor and multimedia producer here at SourceForge, the world's most visited software comparison site where B2B software buyers compare and find business software solutions. Today, we're joined by Danny Jenkins, CEO and co-founder of ThreatLocker, a cybersecurity platform that protects businesses from the various threats that exist in today's digital world. Their approach to security centers around a zero trust model where users and devices have to continuously prove their credentials and their trustworthiness to the organization to gain access to its IT systems. It's widely considered to be the most effective cybersecurity models out there because of its approach to actively challenging the traditional assumptions of inherent trust. That said, its effectiveness really comes down to how well it's implemented and managed. So to talk more about the zero trust approach and the cybersecurity landscape at large, let me introduce Danny Jenkins. Danny, welcome to the podcast. Glad you could join us.
Bo, thank you for inviting me today.
It's a pleasure. I want to jump right into this. I know you're a busy guy. Before we get into some of the technical aspects of your platform, can you tell us what inspired the creation of ThreatLocker? What was the impetus that drove you to start this venture?
So essentially, if I think back to 2014, I think this was probably one of the key turning points for me. I'd been asked to come in and help with a ransomware recovery case. So there was a small insurance broker in Australia, about 50 employees that had been hit by ransomware. And they paid this ransom and they got a decryption key. It didn't work. So they asked me to come and have a look. Their backup was gone. Their email data exchange database was gone. All their SQL servers were gone. Everything was gone. Every laptop, every device in the organization. So we have to go and try and reverse engineer things to try and get their data back up and running. We tried decompiling the reverse engineering the code for the ransomware. We're using low-level recovery tools on the disk. We're trying everything to get this data back. And about a week into the recovery, the owner of the company called me. He was a 60-something-year-old man coming up to retirement age, and his voice is cracking. He's basically in tears, and he's like, "Well, is my business gone?" And I said to him, "I don't know." So look, all ends well that ends well. The business recovered, and we were able to get enough data back. It was not unpainful, but we got it back. But at the end of the recovery, he asked me, "What could I do to stop this from happening?" And I said, well, it's just easy. Block everything by default. And he said, well, that sounds really easy. Why didn't we do this before? So he went to his IT company. His IT company told him I was smoking crack or something and to ignore him. So that was one of the points where he said, okay, this shouldn't be hard, but it is. How do we change that paradigm? And it took another few years before we actually started the company, but that was one of the key cases that made me really say, we've got to change the way software works. We've got to change the way that endpoint protection works.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. I mean, it's interesting to hear about the firsthand experience, the kind of emotional toll that takes on somebody because, I cover current events for Slashdot on a daily basis, and it seems like there's always a new ransomware attack, that's impacting some organization almost on a daily basis. Nowadays, I mean, it's calmed down a little bit the last few months, but it's really the threat that's facing the industry right now. I would say the number one thing. So, okay, what was your background prior to like ThreatLocker 2017? That's when you started the company, right?
Yeah. So I started ThreatLocker in 2017. I started my career in corporate or IT in general. Technically, when I was 15. I left school early and did a lot of corporate IT, ended up being corporate security. Before it was called cybersecurity, it was really just a function of IT. And I founded a few email security businesses. I ran some hosting businesses, hosted exchange businesses. And then for about 4 years before ThreatLocker, I was really just doing mostly ethical hacking. And that turned into mostly ransomware recoveries.
Okay. And so was the threat landscape like more or less the same as it is now when you first started ThreatLocker, at least in 2017? How has it shifted over the years?
So I think we were at the beginning of the shift. So 2014 was really when you started seeing ransomware. Up until then, most cybercrime was really about sending ads, showing pop-ups, spam emails, things like that. There was some phishing and there was some small amounts of data theft, but there wasn't the organization. And I think what we saw in 2014 was this idea of ransomware encrypting files and demanding a payment. And 2017, we think about WannaCry, which encrypted lots and lots of computers, but asked for relatively low ransom. Where we've seen the shift is not from kind of bulk, hey, we're going to hit as many people with this light malware as possible, right up to now we're seeing more targeted. They'll gain a foothold and then they'll really think about the ransom, the data exfil, and getting your backups. And whereas before they just kind of spray and they'll get lucky sometimes, now they'll spray with footholds. So if they get one of these footholds, again, they'll scan the web for RDP servers, they'll send out mass amounts of malware. But now once they get in, they're not looking for $20,000 paydays. They're looking for $200, $1 million, $2 million paydays.
Okay. Wow. So they're a lot more sophisticated, but they're going for a bigger bounty, essentially. Interesting. Okay. And then, I guess along with the rise of ransomware and the shift to remote work, which we'll get to more later in this interview, but along with that, you have more cybersecurity vendors than ever before. So for listeners just tuning in, like what makes ThreatLocker really stand out from the other vendors offering their own cybersecurity solutions?
And really what we focus on, we're in endpoint protection, but our core principles are around the idea of least privilege or zero trust. What I realized very early on, well before 2014, is the only way you can really guarantee, or as close to guarantee as you can get, to stop malware, to stop malicious software, to stop TeamViewer running on your machines, is to stop all software that isn't needed in your business. And what ThreatLocker did is we went out and said, okay, there are a few people doing whitelisting where they'll block executables unless it's on a list, but that's really in restricted environments where you don't have to worry about updates and things like that. We said we need to make it the norm. We need to make allowlisting, ring fencing, network controls, denying by default so easy it's unimaginable. And at the beginning, I remember we started off with this idea we need one small customer and one big customer. If I can get one small and one big, we can get the whole world as customers. And today we have everyone from small dental offices through MSPs right up to parts of the US Navy and JetBlue and big organizations, airports, airlines, banks. And that's really where it changed. It's this idea that you can go and deploy a default deny solution. You can block software by default at the kernel level, including ransomware, including malware, without having to commit hundreds or thousands of hours of man time. We're talking about 10 hours deployment.
Okay, that it makes sense from that approach. My mind goes to when for my own sort of verification for Slashdot and SourceForge here. There's more hoops you have to kind of go through to get access to a device, and I think that for the end user, when you start thinking about these extra security layers, you think of the headache that ensues from from trying to get access to your work. So I don't know, what's your response to the headaches that might come out of a more secure approach?
Actually, it ends up being easier for the user, because think about this. If you're using, go back to customers who don't use ThreatLocker. In order for them to secure their environment from malware, they're quarantining any documents or attachments in emails. They're blocking so many websites that might be malicious. They're really tightening up everything in their environment from hey, we're just going to block as much as we can, but we're not going to stop users from running untrusted software. And then they're putting overly aggressive antivirus and EDR software. So then what happens is the user can be working all day long, everything's working fine, and then suddenly a piece of malware that comes out that has a similar pattern to a good piece of software that you're running, and then the EDR gets overly aggressive and blocks it. When you're denying by default, it's actually a lot easier, because you learn the software you use for business, and then you block everything else. And because we're not now trying to be overly aggressive on everything else, we said, we know we were using it yesterday, we were using it when ThreatLocker onboarded, and we're going to continue to use it. And ThreatLocker is going to take care of the updates for us, so we don't have to worry about that. If you do want a new piece of software, it gives you an approval process to get that. That's really easy. So what happens from the user experience is they download, say, Qt PDF, and it says, hey, Qt PDF isn't allowed in your environment. You can request access, or you can view a list of approved PDF viewers in your environment. So the user can now click on the approved PDF viewers. They can self-install. It will automatically elevate their permissions if they need to run it as an admin, or they can hit request access, and then the IT administrator can approve it in 60 seconds and then give them the ability to self-serve. So people often think about Allowlisting taking away user permissions. It's not. It's really about giving the users the power for the software they need, taking away permissions for unrequired software, and then automating that workflow to make it really, really easy. And in exchange, it means you can relax on your attachment security. You don't have to worry about, oh, this is a Word document that might have something embedded in it, so we're going to block it, because it won't be able to run anyway. You can relax on your internet security because now you know that nothing bad can run on the endpoint without it going through the IT approval process.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, a lot of the security features are kind of happen in the background, it sounds like, and they don't impact the ease of use of, signing in and actually getting your work done.
Yeah, it's really just about software, and people don't change the software they run on their computer. Most people run 10 apps on their computer. That's all they need. If they might download new documents, go to new websites, but it's really just about making sure the software they use continues to run.
Now, what about from a company standpoint who might view like a zero trust approach as maybe too daunting of a model to implement? Do you find that it's once they actually get the information out, you kind of do the onboarding process and they realize, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought? It's just an education limit.
Yeah, one of the things we do is big trials. So we have uncapped trials on what you can install, and I've had companies with 5,000 employees come in and say, oh, this is going to be a 6-month project. We're not going to be able to do this. And I said, okay, well, let's start you on a 6-week trial. And if in 6 weeks you haven't deployed and secured and locked down, then you don't have to buy anything. So you're going to commit. And what we'll ask is an hour, 2-3 hours a week at most during that 6 weeks trial. And I've seen companies with 10,000 endpoints deploy and lock down in 24 hours. I've seen them lock down in an hour, but that's when they've been hit by ransomware and need to get locked down after the fact. But it's not as difficult as people think. It's a process. The process doesn't take a lot of time. Like I said, realistically, most companies, they're going to invest 10, 20 hours to onboard, and they're going to get that back in multiple returns because their IT costs are going to go down, their SOC costs are going to go down, everything else is going to go down.
Yeah. And yeah, the last thing you want is a ransomware attack that just ruins your company. So you can't really put a price on that, but it's needless to say, pretty valuable to have a software service like this. And then also, I just say a free trial. I mean, your product will speak for itself, right? So once you get the free trial, once you start actually getting to use your platform, you kind of see the benefits firsthand.
Yes, that's it. Once you see the platform being used, and once companies deploy just the agent on the free trial, they see how much software they're running that they didn't know. Maybe a Chinese coupon clipper that can see their passwords in their browser, or a remote access tool they didn't know about because someone wanted to work from home, so ran TeamViewer. All of these things can now go away with ThreatLocker.
Gotcha. So, okay, we all know we're all kind of thrown into this remote work world. We know what COVID did for the industry here. It sort of ushered us in a decade or more into the future, right? And then there's been sort of some pushback from corporations lately to get people back into the office. But I think by and large, we've seen the shift to remote work here to stay. So to talk about some of the challenges associated with remote work and hybrid work and the security aspect, how does ThreatLocker help businesses secure their workforce regardless of where employees are located?
So I think the perimeter is now your device, your laptop, your computer. That's where people are operating from. And in the old days, we protected our network with firewalls and perimeter security. And now users can go home on the same network as their 15-year-old son. And that's a big problem. So you need to really focus on how do you secure the endpoint in these scenarios. Because you've got users at home who shadow IT becomes a huge problem. They just want to download apps that they want. They don't want to ask for permission for those apps. They want to put your company data in it. They want to play games, and they also want unprotected networks. So I think that's probably the biggest concern we have. We also have people who, and obviously this has calmed down a bit, but we saw at the beginning of 2020, you've suddenly got people who have come in the office every day, pressed a button on their machine, opened their finance app, and typed in numbers. And now suddenly they're being asked to join company meetings by Zoom, and they've never used Zoom in their life. So they get this email from this random person saying, hey, download the latest version of Zoom before your meeting. And they click on it and it's a piece of malware. And this causes lots of problems as well, because you've got unfamiliar users who are now getting things they didn't understand. So that explodes cyber crime. I think where ThreatLocker helps is, one is it allows the IT person centrally and remotely to control what's going on all of the assets around the world. or those security people. They can monitor their endpoints at home. If someone plugs in a USB drive, they can see it, they can block it, they can see if someone copies files to it, what the files were, what process they use, what programs they're running, what websites they're going to, and then you can control those things. And what ThreatLocker does is it gives you that one dashboard where you can go in and say, this is a software that can run on all my endpoints. This is what that software can do. This is what categories of websites people can go to. This is where the USB drives can be used and which USB drives for which file types. This is what programs can run as a local admin. And then it also gives that easy approval process. So when your user is at home and says, hey, I need to install this new software, you say approve, they can just approve it by themselves or run it by themselves.
Okay, gotcha. That seems pretty enticing. I mean, I like the all-in-one approach there, and being able to see everything you need to secure and what it's actually doing, translating what it's doing in basic terms you can understand. I think that's how you can really get the most out of these software platforms, because a lot of them are so technical. You're like, what is it even doing in the first place? Now, I also want to say, so along with the rise of remote work, we're starting to see, I guess, governments around the world sort of come up with their own sort of regulations for protecting digital privacy. We've seen GDPR. There's HIPAA in the healthcare industry. A lot of it depends on where you're located, what industry you're in. And I know you actively support businesses in meeting these standards, but I'm curious if you think these standards are sufficient to keep our data private and secure. Is there anything you'd like to see maybe given more attention? I'm just curious to hear like what your view on cybersecurity policy is in general.
So generally, there's two parts of this. There's compliance and the standard. And compliance, more often than not, focuses on privacy and not security. So GDPR, HIPAA are really about what you can share, what you can't share, and protecting that data. And then you've got standards like NIST, ISO, CIS, those type of controls. So if implemented properly, and I use properly, probably in a incorrect way, these standards can really help you, because if you read through any of the controls, like NIST has 100 and something controls, and they're going to say, like, you should implement application allow listing to block untrusted software. But a lot of the wording in these standards is being written in a way that can be interpreted. And this is where it gets complicated. So if you were to follow NIST or ISO to the letter, and you were to, with good faith, say, this means this, so I'm going to do this, you're going to be in a much better cybersecurity state. I think the challenge is they're so complicated that people aren't doing them. And I think the best example of government influence I can name on cybersecurity standards is the Australian Essential 8. Now, we know there's 150 things you should be doing for security, but Australia went away and they said, what things can we do? What are the most important 8 things we can do? And they figured that 96 point something % of cyber attacks would be stopped by making 8 changes to your system. And rather than trying to get the whole world to implement 150, which is what the US is doing, they said you should implement these 8. And why this is interesting is because the 8 are things like taking away admin permissions, implementing dual factor, application allow listing or application control, disabling macros, real basic things. And what's interesting is I would say probably 40+% of the population are determined to follow the Essential 8 in Ireland, even though there's no legal requirement to do it. Whereas if you compared the same percentage of people in the US that had those 8 controls in place, it's more like 2, 1 maybe. So I think it's important, but it's also sometimes over too many recommendations leads to nothing happening.
That's really interesting. I wasn't aware of the Australian, the Essential 8 things to secure. That's really fascinating, because I totally see how that would translate to real world effects in terms of just if there's 150 things you got to do, you just get overwhelmed, you don't do them. There's also probably different weights, I guess, or penalties associated maybe with not following through. I guess it comes down to compliance versus enforcement action. There's 2 separate things you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and compliance, unless you're doing business with the federal government, there's not too much compliance in the US on what you have to do from a secure, and most of the world. HIPAA is more around privacy. GDPR is around privacy more so than what security controls you must implement. Now, if you get hacked, you now breach privacy laws.
True. I know also like the US doesn't have a comprehensive data privacy protection law. I mean, we've kind of like used GDPR, we've used some like laws and applied them to the digital age from the 1900s. But we've kind of, it's like California kind of has their own legislation that is adopted by larger companies, right?
Yeah. So California has a lot, again, privacy legislation, not security. Very different things. So obviously, not having security can lead to a privacy breach, but quite often, privacy legislation doesn't say you should. I mean, sometimes they'll get into controls. They'll say you must have files encrypted, but most of it is not saying you should block untrusted software. It's not saying you should take away admin rights. It's saying that this data can't be shared without the consent of the customer. This data can't be used. You can't copy cookies between sessions. You can't use tracking cookies for this. That tends to be the extent of the privacy laws, as opposed to implement these security controls.
Gotcha. Do you think there's like an area that's maybe too regulated or doesn't maybe apply as much as it used to? Maybe when the internet was first being ushered in?
Oh, I think I don't know if the word too regulated, but regulated in the wrong place is, and regulation without enforcement is complete garbage. If you don't enforce regulation, it's kind of pointless. But quite often, there's like GDPR is such a mess from a regulation standpoint point of view. Nobody knows what they're allowed to do or not allowed to do. There's too many gray areas around. Am I allowed to log things? If I'm logging access to my system, am I capturing personal information? Where's that personal information going? Am I allowed to use it to determine analysis on threats? And it's so regulated, nobody knows the outcome. I think it would be better to regulate more precisely and say this is defined actions that you should be doing or you shouldn't be doing, as opposed to creating these broad regulations that nobody understands.
Yeah, I like that clarification or that breakdown, because and it's so true. Like I was just reading a blog post last week of this developer who wrote an open world sort of zombie game that runs over the browser, and it's been going for 20 plus years. And basically, the developer just wrote like, "Hey, we got to shut down because we're based in the UK. We got to follow GDPR. We don't know exactly how it's going to affect us, but we know that it's too risky to follow through with keeping the site up and running." And so they announced they're closing down. And it just comes down to it's so technical and confusing, and but the penalties are so harsh where it kind of creates these unfortunate outcomes.
We've seen governments do this over decades and decades. They respond to problems with massive penalties as opposed to tangible. And that's not just in the IT world. So I think what they need to do is give us tangible things we should be doing. And like I said, Australia is probably, and it's not perfect by any means, but it's the closest I've seen to a tangible list of things that people should do.
Well, hey, I'll be going there in a couple of weeks, so I'll have to start paying more attention to that. Maybe I'll see some more pop-ups and other disclaimers about it.
Yeah, well, it's not about privacy. That's the thing. It's about general security controls. So if you ask companies, do they follow the essential 8, the IT departments, that more so say yes than not.
Okay, so I wouldn't necessarily experience it firsthand as an end user.
No, and that's the thing. Like GDPR is all about pop-ups and telling people. And look, you have to tell everyone you've used cookies. So everyone says we use cookies. Do you go to their website still? So, like it means nothing. Like those kind of overregulation. It's just now everyone's got a load of pop-ups. If you go to Ireland, you can't search something without actually getting a warning that Google's tracking your data. So every time you hit search and accept. And but Australia is more about tangible security controls.
So what about in the world of AI and how has that impacted your company? I know it's transformed the industry as well as cybersecurity, and I think it's largely left unregulated, at least here in the US. So, but I'm just curious, like, what kind of AI tools are you baking into ThreatLocker?
So I think there's two parts to that. I mean, of course, we use AI, for a lot of things in ThreatLocker. It could be something as generating job offers, and it speeds you up. It could be research. We use it heavily on to understand research of the industry and what's happening and how things work. I think when we think about ThreatLocker, people often think about AI as generative AI. And that's not, majority of AI is not generative AI. It's not ChatGPT. But we have massive intelligence. We log billions of rows of data an hour, and we're able to use that to determine what the normal behavior of applications are, that kind of machine learning, and then suggesting valuable ring fencing policies based on other people's use of software, and say this is the way that software should behave. Anything outside of this is outside of the norm. And that's really our goal, is not to determine what's bad, but to determine what normal good behavior is, and everything else is irrelevant, whether good or bad, shouldn't be allowed. Where I think I have more concerns than I do excitement about AI is, we did a year and a half ago, we asked ChatGPT to create us a piece of malware to gain access to someone's machine. And we Googled for the same piece of malware. So we Googled, give me code for reverse shell. Went to ChatGPT, asked for code for reverse shell. Took both pieces of malware. So first ChatGPT said no, but we said, please, we're a cybersecurity professional. So it gave it to us. And took both pieces of malware, ran them, both functionally identical. The one on Google got blocked immediately. The one on ChatGPT immediately let through. Now, they've tightened up their controls, but I actually have a couple of videos that I did just last week. I asked ChatGPT for a reverse shell. It said no. I said, please. It said no. I said, so, well, can I get an IT support team tool so I can get command line access to a user's computer? And it said, yes. It's the exact same function. And then I asked it for a piece of backup software. So I asked it for a piece of malware to steal documents, find documents on the computer and steal them and upload them to Google Cloud. It said no. I said, please. It said no. So I asked it for a piece of backup software to find all the documents on my computer and upload them to Google Cloud, which is exactly the same function. And it gave me the code. And I think that's the concern I have with AI more than anything, is we've now gone from a few million people that are capable of creating malware to 4, 5, 6 billion people that have access to computers. And it's also undetectable, because how do you know if something is backup software or malware? So a piece of backup software, the behavior on your computer, if you downloaded some backup software now to back up your files to the cloud, will take your files from your computer and upload them to the internet to back them up. And that's good. That's the intent of that. You downloaded that backup software and you have control of the Google Cloud repository. So it's good software. If you were to write a piece of malware, or you were to download another tool that does the exact same thing, it takes your files and uploads them to Google Cloud. But the Google Cloud, the person who created that was copying your files to steal them. The difference, the software is the exact same thing, but the intent in which it was used or created is bad. And what I see is companies saying AI is the future. We're detecting AI with threats with AIs. But I asked ChatGPT, was this malicious software? And the answer was very definedly no. And that's just one AI. And now you get into this thing that AI can't tell intent, but it can be used to create software for bad purposes.
Yeah, that's and that's, I think you just touched on where it's like that's just one AI, that's one example. I mean, you have all these different some public threads of different ways to bypass certain restrictions for OpenAI, but you can, if that doesn't work, you can try Llama, you can try Grok. I know, like just messing around with Grok, it's a lot more open and has less restrictions than like OpenAI. It's gotten a little bit more closed down lately. But yeah, that's concerning. You know, it's hopefully it doesn't leave too many people with doom and gloom from that standpoint. Do you see yourself partnering with some of these AI providers? Are you already partnered with them to kind of help secure their systems?
No, and look, I think the problem they have is they don't know the intent of what someone's doing on their machine. Yeah, I think where we have to focus, if we have to, and by the way, the answer is not to block AI, because all we'll do is fall well behind the rest of the world. The answer is to embrace it and to accept the risks associated with, to accept that we can't trust videos of people now, to accept that voice manipulation and changing is almost perfect, to accept that that we can't detect malware, and to just block software by default. I think if we accept these things and we build our technologies to better defend against them, we're in a much stronger position. And we don't work with any specific AI vendors. I mean, we test AI all the time, but it's these guys, they have no way of solving the problem. They can just make it a little bit harder for the bad guys to write malware.
I mean, and at the end of the day, that's kind of what it's all about with these regulations that governments try to enforce. Is just making it a little bit harder to carry out these bad outcomes, right?
Yeah, I think that's the point of it, or to make companies scared that they have to do something to protect their users, which they should.
So, okay, let's look kind of more on the rosy side of things, and I'm curious, what kind of, you mentioned some of the features that the AI features that are in the works currently. What else do you have maybe coming down the pipeline, or maybe you could talk about some of the lesser known features that IT teams should check out?
So I think some of the new stuff we've released recently is ThreatLocker Insights. I think is really exciting. It's been my brainchild for it since day one. I've been trying to get this up and running. The ability to see data on files from a good perspective, because everyone's trying to look for, is this a bad file? But what if you looked at it another way? Is this a good file? Is this used by many people? How common is it? When did it first get seen? What does it normally access? What should I give it access to? And we basically taken data from millions of endpoints to be able to determine what is normal behavior. So we know normal behavior of Zoom is to talk to zoom.us. We know normal behavior of Office is to talk to office.com. And we can give people this intelligence so they can determine what is abnormal behavior from that. So super excited about that. The other problems we really solved recently in ThreatLocker, and we got to think about our platform. It's a full endpoint protection platform. Some people will come in and say, I just need elevation technology to run certain programs as a local admin and to give my users an easy workflow. Others will come in and say, I need to block untrusted software. I need to limit what software can do. But the other thing you can do with ThreatLocker that's quite exciting, people don't realize, you can control access to storage. You can control access to website categories. So we released a new web filtering platform recently that will actually tell you that someone's going to an adult site, block it, report on it, everything in one central place, and stop it happening in your network. Gambling sites, malicious sites, phishing sites. When we integrate that with Insights, it's now able to tell us this is the first time this site's been seen, therefore it's high risk. So we might block it for users who shouldn't be going to new websites. So we've got all of these really advanced features come in. And the other one that's exciting for me is our new MDR and EDR features. So we have, I would argue, probably one of the most advanced EDRs on the market that doesn't just look at known indicators of compromise, but can also set limits around your environment. So you can say things like, hey, I need to let my finance director or CFO access all of my files. But I'm going to say if they access more than 50 and try to upload more than 50 files or 20 files within an hour, I'm going to shut their access down if they're on Dropbox or something like that. But we added all these advanced features where not only can we tell you of a threat in your environment, but we can give you single click recommendations to stop that being a risk for your business. And our hope is, rather than just telling IT people you're doing things wrong, telling them here's a button you can click on your phone that will take that risk away. More IT people will click the button.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff to keep an eye on and check out, sounds like. How often do you release updates?
So typically, I mean, we release updates about every month, but typically what we end up doing is at Zero Trust World every year, which is our conference we had last month in February, we release our major product updates. And then throughout the year, we release enhancements and improvements. So we'll really focus on how do we make these products, especially if there's new products, smoother, better. We'll take feedback from our clients, and they'll come out monthly. And then, and normally, sometimes toward the end of the year, we'll have another product announcement too.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, and then so when you gather feedback, is it a kind of a culmination of like, things you hear about at vendors, at trade shows, comments from teams directly over email? Like, how do you gather feedback for revisions or updates or new features?
So we have 45 solution engineers that do calls with customers. Most customers once a month, sometimes once a quarter, sometimes customers once a week, and they'll walk customers through things, and they'll give us the customers will give us feedback, but they'll also see where a customer's struggling, and they'll give feedback as well. They'll say the customer's asking why can't they see this, or why is this so hard, and sometimes it's just not intuitive. So, and they'll also give feedback. So we'll get a huge amount of feedback from our solution engineers. It's worth noting, both from an EDR and a cyber hero approvals perspective. So we are the biggest approver of our whitelisting software. We're the biggest user of our own software. So we manage close to 1 million endpoints on cyber hero approvals. So when people say whitelisting is too hard, imagine we do approvals for 1 million endpoints, if not more. And so we're actually really great at giving our own feedback. And then trade shows is another one. I make a point. I think ThreatLocker did 850 trade shows last year. I went to 120. And I speak to customers, I get down on the trade show floor, and I make sure I understand what's their pain points.
Awesome. Yeah, I was checking out your LinkedIn. I see a lot of the highlights from some of those shows, and it's cool to see you so hands-on and involved. Always nice to see, like, and also very like public facing. You know, I think a lot of some leaders and just kind of handle the business side of things and kind of take a step back. But obviously, you're really involved and interested in this industry and shows.
I think as a leader in any position, I mean, we're obviously a much bigger company than we used to be. I think we've gone from zero to $1.5 billion company in 7 years. But as a leader, I think the moment you don't care about your product and your customers, and you're not 100% invested in that, your product starts to diminish and fail. And I've seen it over and over again. The best products become the worst products. And I'm determined to make sure that not only I, but everyone else in ThreatLocker should understand that the moment we stop innovating, the moment that we stop listening to problems and solving problems, we're dead.
Yeah, I love it. That's some good advice. And we're coming down to our last couple of questions, and I just want to ask what, I kind of mentioned like asking you what you have coming down the pipeline of product and updates. But what do you see as like the next big maybe threat or thing to focus on in the next few years, maybe 5 years, if that's not too far to look at? What do you see as like, because ransomware, you've talked about ransomware being the kind of a big threat in today's world. What do you see else we have to keep an eye on?
So I think ransomware evolution, and we're seeing this quite already, but it used to be encrypting files and then holding you hostage to decrypt them. And then it was data theft. And now we're seeing it tap into cloud accounts, gaining access to customer data, and progression beyond your organization. So I think we're going to see more and more of that, where we're going to see if someone gets hit, they may not even know they got hit, but that can be used as a gateway into other organizations. So I think that's a big threat. Supply chain attacks increasing rapidly, desperately trying to get into companies, nation states. So I'm super scared about nation states at the moment, because I think we're closest to war than we have been since the 1940s. And nation states are definitely, data collection is a huge risk. And it's not just at a, hey, we're trying to hack the government. But if you imagine that malware and backdoors get built into millions and millions of endpoints in the US, I see more and more software with backdoor. The Bluetooth chip a few days ago, I think, was announced with malware built in from a Chinese chip manufacturer, or backdoor built in. I think this is a big concern, and we're going to start seeing this play out over the next few years.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot to consider. We've seen like the phasing out of different Chinese hardware and the various backdoors with some of our critical infrastructure. So yeah, I can see the good reason to be kind of concerned and keep an eye on that sort of threat vector. Now, to wrap everything up, if you could sum up ThreatLocker's mission in one key insight, what might you say?
ThreatLocker. So our mission is to change the world to treat security from a default allow perspective to a default deny. So if we deny by default, cybercrime goes away. And that's our mission, is to make the entire world, whether it's through education or whether it's through product, is to really accelerate that progression.
Awesome. And then for those wanting to learn more about ThreatLocker, where should you send them?
Best thing is threatlocker.com, and just schedule a demo. Someone walk you through what we do, show you some examples, and it costs nothing. It's very easy. Just go to threatlocker.com.
Threatlocker.com. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Danny Jenkins. That's Danny Jenkins, CEO and co-founder of ThreatLocker. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to sit down and talk with us.
Thank you, Bo.
Thank you all for listening to the SourceForge podcast. I'm your host, Bo Hamilton. Make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all of our upcoming B2B software related podcasts. I will talk to you in the next one.